Hello chess friends, this is FIDE Master Valeri Lilov and welcome to my newest blog post on YouTube. Today I'd like to discuss a very important matter that drew my attention a few days ago. And despite it, I'm used to share with you some brilliant master games or very interesting positions. Right now I'd like to focus on a matter that is very important to any chess player who is competitively playing on over-the-board tournaments, and essentially the topic involves the cheating scandal that occurred in the International Grandmaster tournament in Zadar, Croatia, that finished in December. In the beginning of January, there was an article published in the news of chessbase.com, and it was about a 2200 Bulgarian chess player, a country-mate of mine, as a matter of fact, who was rated only 2200, and he managed to defeat a few top grandmasters rated above 400 points than his level. When actually, what was even more impressive is that these grandmasters didn't put up any fight. The opening was over and they were completely destroyed. So obviously there were some cheating rumors, and of course there was a scandal afterwards. There were some articles published in the internet that there was a search, but I've actually made my own investigation, and I would like to share with you some of the facts and ideas that I was able to find, and of course certain things that will help you to decide for yourself if there was a cheating or if there was no cheating and it was a pure miracle what happened in that tournament. So I'm first of all going to open the actual article that was in ChessBase. So as you can see, 4th of January 2013. So we have in this event with 16 grandmasters and a host of other strong players, one participant stood out, especially the 25-year-old untitled Bulgarian Borislav Ivanov scored 6 out of 9 points with a rating performance of 26.97. In the January FIDE list, Ivanov has gained 115 points over his previous 22.77 rate, gained in over 400 games over 3 years. A certain suspicion once again raises its ugly head. As you can see, the prologue today to this article is quite interesting, and so I'm gonna click here and it's going to open. Now, I'm not going to go through the whole article. I just wanted to share with you certain things that made a lot of impression to me, that drew actually my attention to that event. And the first thing that we see is the actual standings after the last round, where we see that the first top, the top 3 are over 2600. So we have Borki Predojevic 2600, Hrvoje Stevic 2600, Andrei Sumas 2600, and on the 4th place with an almost equal amount of points, we have a 2200 untitled player. Now he has gained 49 rating points, while all the other players have gained at most 1, 4, 6 because of their ratings. I mean, they're obviously much higher, and that just doesn't sound right. Like, you see, there are international masters here, other grandmasters lower rated, and they obviously have less points than this player. So this is very, very suspicious. But okay, after all, this is not enough. I mean, having a suspicion must be proved. I mean, there is always the chance that maybe this player was somewhat ill, or he just prepared before that tournament and he really had the chance to get better positions and win. And so then we see the actual results, which is even more suspicious than that. So we have the results from round 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So 9-round tournament. So we see a kind of a nice start. Win against 2400, loss versus 2500, then win against 25, draw, two wins, and then okay, a draw, loss, a win. So it looks very consistent result for a grandmaster level player who is in shape. This is pretty normal for a 2600 grandmaster to have a similar result. We also see beautiful victories, which are against number 1, 2640, who lost against the master level player, and we see number 3 of the actual tournament and who lost, and we also see the number 2. So basically, the only one who made a draw was number 1. So number 2 and number 3 out of the whole tournament, 2 very experienced grandmasters, were destroyed. Okay, now below the article continues with some actual facts that the Bulgarian was stripped naked, which is of course not true, and searched. So as a result, they didn't find anything, as a matter of fact. But something very interesting in that article is the saying where technologies are so developed now that theoretically, since the games were aired live, Ivanov's friends in a neighborhood room from Sofia or even from the Antarctic could have sent him hints for his moves through chips, which could have been placed under his skin, in the ear, or in the teeth. Kurajica added. Alright, so this is not enough. I mean, okay, we have a lot of these, and when some player 2200 wins 2600 Grandmasters, we do have that sort of suspicion, because it doesn't happen often. It's really not common. And then you can see this his rating chart, where you can see that he's been standing around 2200 for a pretty long time. Okay, he hasn't played that much, but for a pretty long time, and then suddenly he gets like 70 points, which leads his rating to 2330 or so on. So I was kind of curious and decided to actually investigate that matter myself. So the first thing that I did was that I actually downloaded the games. So any one of you, you can visit the ChessBase website and you can download the games yourself. So there's a link out there. So I actually had the chance to download the games and made a very interesting inquiry. So here we have the 9 games that he's played, and let's begin with the first game. So I just wanted to show you what I was able to find, together with my engine and my own understanding of how a human should think, and what seemed very unnatural about these games. So let's begin with game number 1, that was played between Ivanov and Schachinger, a 24-26 player, strong player. So now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to start my engine. I have the strongest engine on the planet, Houdini 3 Pro. And I'm going to be comparing the moves, or at least the most important moves that he played, with those that the engine suggests. So let's have a look. Okay, so in this first game, Ivanov had the white pieces. So we have the King's Indian, a very interesting opening. The opening really doesn't matter, as it's obviously all theory. So you have to keep in mind that if there was any sort of cheating, we cannot say anything about the opening, because the opening, the computer can use any sort of an opening tree or an opening book. And so despite the fact that the analysis now is different, if the computer is set to play the game, he's not going to use any analysis now. He's going to use his opening book. And the opening book, of course, now I have loaded the Fritz opening book. But if it's another book, it will also suggest. So we see that he's playing by the opening book. And now, actually, the game starts going differently. Check this out. So the first 6 moves were played by theory. And let's check the rest of the moves. Now, first we have d-dix e5 here, which is a normal move that I would not play it, and most masters would not play, simply because everybody knows that exchanging on the e5 is simply not right here for white. Now, this is not right because we give away the center, and because black has the easy way to equalize. He anyway plays d-dix e5, and afterwards we have the exchange of queens, queen takes d8, rook takes d8. And let's take a look. So the bishop to g5 move is, as you can see, on the first row by the computer. Bishop g5 is suggested by Houdini 3. Now, it's my belief that the Houdini 3 was not used. If there was any cheating, it wasn't used that engine. It was used Houdini 2. Now, that is my belief. But I'm going to check it with the strongest engine so we can see the similarities and make some stats afterwards. So white played bishop g5, suggested by the computer. And then we have knight takes d5, which is also suggested by the computer. Now keep in mind that if an engine is playing the game and the player is accepting any sort of signal in his ear, or as I'm going to suggest you something else, the engine has the time to think, you see. So the engine has the time to think before the operator, whoever is on the computer from another room, or from actually following the games on the internet, he has the chance to start the computer to think while Schachinger is analyzing the position. And then, After 15 minutes or 20 minutes, he comes up with a move. Okay, so black plays, the computer, stops his own thinking, plays the move, and that's how the game goes. So basically, black is playing against an engine. Now, but of course, there's no proof yet, so that's why we're analyzing. I'm just saying, hypothetically, what could have happened. So not always the moves that you're going to see are going to be on the first place of the Houdini. This means that now I'm starting my Houdini, and it has about a few seconds to think. Okay, but what we want to do is to see if the moves of Ivanov are on the first three choices of the computer engine Houdini. Now, with a little bit of thinking, as it could have been in the game, the move that's on number 3 in my list can easily get a number 1. But let's see what happened. So c6, knight takes d5, another move that suggested a number 1. Okay, long castles, another move that's a number 1. What you're going to see right now is that the following moves are all number 1 on the computer. Just take a look. Black played knight a6, and then we have another number 1, rook to d6. Okay, black develops his bishop, and then we have f4, which comes to number 1 of the engine. Now that could have been a preparation, so that doesn't prove anything. Let's go on. Knight c5, bishop f3, as you can see white's opponent, but black has a decent position, and he plays h6. Of course, you can see now the difference. Black is playing a very humanly move. The idea of this move is to drive the bishop away and eventually weaken the white structure with the potential g5 or whatever. But let's see how white continued. The bishop moves back, knight d7, trade, takes. And now, the move of king c2 happens to be a number 2 of the computer. Now it gets to number 1, and that's being played. It's a very interesting move. It defends the knight, let's say, so the black doesn't double the pawns. But something very interesting that we noticed is that out of the last 10 moves, I would say at least 6 or 7 were actually on the first place of the computer. Then we go on with once more time the first move by the computer, b3. Now I got the second place, but after a little bit of thinking, perhaps Houdini is going to change it to first. So b3. g5, again, the bishop goes to g3, something that the computer is suggesting as well. Bishop takes the pawn, and now the bishop comes back to e3. You can see that if not in the first place, the move that white chooses is always either on first or second place, or if it's on a third place, it can easily go to first place. So essentially, with a little bit more analysis, as basically, if an engine was playing, it would have had some more time to analyze. After all, the games were classic time control, 90 minutes plus 30 seconds for every move. Certainly, if the move is there on the first three main choices of the engine, a better analysis could be made. And what really strikes me is that I've seen many Grandmaster games, you see. I have a lot of experience with playing Grandmasters myself and seeing Grandmaster games. I've never seen someone to have that many coincidence moves that really fit with what the computer says in the first place. But I just want to show that to you, so let's continue. Okay, so here we have the only move that isn't on the top 3 is rook hd1, but I believe that actually after a little while the computer gives it as one of the solid moves, as this brings out the rook. And then we do have bishop h5, another move that's suggested by the computer. And okay, so now you're probably going to say, okay, rook to d2, why doesn't white play rook d7? Because I suppose that wasn't the move that the actual engine recommended. And what we see is, again, the engine suggested rook d7, but after a little bit of thinking, we have rook d2 again, and that's the move that was recommended in first place. It's 90% computer moves. Even bishop c5 that was played now is again a sort of a computer move. Rook f2, first place in the computer, we have it. Knight takes e4, knight f6, bishop a3. Every move is just perfect. As you can see, this is one of the actual things that I've noticed about these games. Every single move is almost perfect. Could that be that this player in that game had the talent and maybe we can say the luck to find those moves? Could be. Let's investigate a little further. I mean, okay, we continue with the game. As you can, if you look at the right side where the engine console is, every move is pretty much what the engine recommends. Even bishop b2 that includes the bishop seems great. Black is gradually and very consistently, perfectly, I would say, outplayed. So as a result, we do have some bad things going on. Knight f6, and he's losing. So that game was a real kill. I mean, black made some inaccuracies which white just spotted quickly, and he exploited them perfectly. But let's take a look at the other game. For example, there was a very important speculation about the game that happened in round 2, where Ivanov lost versus Grandmaster Ognian Jovanic, 25-83, so he was playing black. What's pretty interesting about this game is that there is a reason why black lost, and I would like to show that to you. I mean, after a pretty reasonable opening, as we can see, then there is d6 to c, a4, there was some sort of theory. If we start the opening book, we can see b6 was out of the book. And actually, after exchanges, bishop to b7, bishop e7, something that we're going to see is that the position got very close. Every single move that happens from now on is kind of reasonable for black. And as you will see, it kind of fits in the computer. Check this out. Going back to the position after e4, e5, okay, or even here. Castles is the first place of the computer. We have knight d5, something he suggests as well. C takes d, first suggestion. Knight b8 is the first suggestion. Knight c6 is the first suggestion. h6 is the first suggestion. I don't want to say first suggestion anymore, so you can just follow the move that is played with what the computer is giving. Okay, on that side. Even a5, which is totally logical. I'd never do a5 myself. Why? Because that violates one of the simple rules. Don't play on the area of the board where your opponent is stronger, but the computer plays it. Why? Because there is a calculation behind that move. So the move actually looks interesting. The computer suggests that move on the first place as well. We have knight b4, another computer move, queen d7, another computer move. So you're probably wondering why the computer gives the position equal. Why? Well, there is something very important about computers. I like computers, but one of the things that I've noticed about computers, and every strong master is going to confirm this, is that computers are extremely bad in close positions. The reason why they're extremely bad is because when the position closes, the computers cannot make a plan. All that the computer is doing is to calculate, and of course many computer programs, especially nowadays when the computer engines are so sophisticated, the computers make a perfect calculation. The thing is, however, that when the position closes, there is nothing so much to calculate because the position is kind of static. It doesn't change, and you need to make a plan. For example, right here, you can say, okay, I'd like to move here. For instance, if black wanted to win, and if an engine wants to win, you easily do f6 to open up, perhaps get the bishop around that diagonal. And we could see that when the position opens, he'd be able to use his tactical strength. But you see, he cannot do that because, for example, f6 would weaken the king side, and the computer says, no, I'm not going to open my king side, so I'm going to play the correct moves, rook c8, which fit his 5 or 6 moves calculation ahead. So this means the computer cannot imagine. It doesn't have that imagination thing that helps him to visualize where the pieces should stand, how they can go, and what they should do at certain positions. So okay, black plays rook c8, and as you can see, white simply cannot lose. It's not about whether white's playing good. It's just that the position turned out to be rather close, and as a result, the computer does not have a chance to win. Now, does that mean that it kind of says that, okay, everybody can use a computer because if the opponent closes the position, it's going to be okay? No, that's not a good thinking. You say, it was just a pure luck for white that he managed to get that close type of position, and whatever the computer is, it cannot win if white plays normally. This position is draw. But let's see what happens later. After the exchange, I mean, if you're following up, you're going to notice that every single move that black played from the very beginning of move 10 is just what the computer suggests. Even king f8 is the one move. Then we have knight c2, the computer move. It's just that white is an experienced grandmaster, and because of the character of the position, there is no way how this game may be lost. So later on, we find out some interesting things going on. While the position continues to be equal, I'm just going to replay very fast through these moves, and black is continuing to follow the computer's first move and do all that the computer suggests. There happens something very strange in this situation. We have a dead draw type of position in which they play around 20 more moves in a pretty much the same position, only one pawn exchanges. I think it will be a good idea if we save a little bit of time and we move on to the position where things are still equal. As you can see, black is still following the moves of the computer, although this time it's a little simpler, and we can say that it's a lot easier to find those moves than in any other situation. And suddenly something very strange happens. What happens is the move King d6, Bishop e7, and on move 100 and okay, so we have 113, 114, 115. You know, that's amazing. It's like it's a very, very interesting situation. Black plays Bishop d6, and I believe this was a moment of time trouble. The reason why is because the move of Bishop to the d6 simply doesn't make any sense. To me, if there was a computer used, probably the operator from the other room or wherever did not have the time to play the move on the computer and to say in the speaker and in that mini microphone what should be the right move to be played. So he didn't have the time to do it. So black makes a completely logical move. You see, I am a 2400 player, but I just wouldn't even think about moving my bishop in this position. Why? Because it's pretty easy what black has to do in order to make a draw. He needs to keep his king on d6, and he needs to protect the pawn on d5 and wait with his bishop. This is dead simple. Now let me tell you, this is a 30 minutes per move game. This means you can't lose because you're in time trouble. Okay? You may make a mistake if the position is more complicated, but not a blunder from this kind. A 2200 even cannot make that blunder, except if he doesn't get panicked or whatever. This is a pretty simple blunder. Black plays bishop to d6, after which white attacks the pawn that's unsupported by the king, and as a result he gets into completely lost endgame. Now this is something I cannot understand. How a player who is playing almost everything perfect is going to make a simple blunder like this? Really? Well, let's go on with the next game. This one, we can say, was lucky for white because he closed the position, he waited until the blitz happened, and then black made a blunder. But let's take a look at another one. Now that's probably the most impressive game that was played between Ivanov and Kurajica. Kurajica is one of the strongest grandmasters of Bosnia, and the way how he got beaten in this game is really shameful. Shameful. He played very logical moves, but white simply destroyed him. And that is something unbelievable. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Why was Ivanov? So he started with d4, c4. Now I'm going to just go through the opening kind of quickly. And I just want you to follow the analysis of the computer. Keep in mind, I'm using 3 CPUs, Houdini 3 Pro 64-bit version. Take a look at what white is doing. Bishop to g2, castles, knight f3, computer move, castles, computer move, a3, computer move, the first place of the computer, rook takes a3. Now, any human player would never have made this move. Why? The opening book suggests this, that there are only 2 games, although I would never do that kind of move, because it doesn't sound logical. You see, the thing is that those pawns are doubled. We want to keep those pawns doubled, so that eventually black has them as a problem in some future position. White's advantage could eventually be around the queen side and around the center, and at some point, maybe if we really get preparation, we can do a3 and expand on the queen side. I'd do knight bd2. This move is weird. But going further, after rook takes a3, knight c3, and then d5, white actually got the chance to open. And now look at these moves. We have knight c3, d5, a very precise move, and an unhuman move, because this move really gives away squares like c5 and e5, and it sets that pawn in a square where it can be attacked. Of course, there is a precision, and when black closes the position, white makes this immediate knight h4, which has nothing to do with the initial plan that started on the queen side. Isn't that a little strange? Moves that are based on pure calculation just because we want to jump somewhere in order to control certain spot. That's not how you beat a 25-60 Grandmaster, believe me. Later on, there was g6, and of course, white took advantage of the dark squares quite quickly. Knight h5, and the queen is moving. The moves seem very chaotic, something that is not common for the human playered games. Why? Because while the computer bases everything on calculation, the humans base everything on the logic. This means the logical idea, for example, for a human will be to follow a plan in a certain area. And he deviates from the plan only if there is something obvious or something very important to do on the opposite side. There's nothing obvious and there is nothing that important to do on the king side. Now, these squares cannot give white a huge advantage. Who would really play a move like knight h4 and queen h6 without an obvious possibility to achieve something? I suppose that black also didn't believe that white's plan can be successful. I can't see that either. But the next moves just prove it. It's an extraordinary play. There is e4, with which white opens up the center, and then we do have an exchange and the move knight b5. And that was kind of amazing because white's attacking on both sides now. He's having his pieces on the king side, he's having his pieces on the queen side, he's attacking here and there, and the trouble that black is experiencing is huge. Now, there was a grandmaster in that tournament who actually said that there was no fighting, there was no resistance in those games. You see, we see that Ivanov's opponents were actually playing pretty logical, and yet they were losing just because they were smashed by a genius mind that was actually dictating those moves, you know. And I hardly believe that this genius mind was the mind of the 2200 master player. So let me show you why. Going a little further, after knight b5 there was a complete outplaying, rook takes a7, but what's most extraordinary is the continuation, the follow-up of that game. We do have knight c6, and we do have this extraordinary knight f5, which sets the knight on a fire of 3 of the black pieces. And actually the whole idea is that if black takes it with the rook, there is queen d8 check, and there is queen takes to c8, and there is knight e7. You see, if you have looked carefully at the analysis of the computer, you're going to find out that every single move is suggested by the computer. Every single one of them. You see, I've seen games of Magnus Carlsen, who I deeply respect, and I really love his games. I haven't seen anything like that. He's playing a lot of powerful moves, but all of them make sense. They're strong. If you look at them with the computer, you'll find out that many of the moves just make sense. They're not with the computer. Some moves can follow the computer's idea, but many they don't. And that's the normal way of how human plays. What we see here is totally the opposite. We see a very chaotic, very illogical battle, some amazing moves, and a pure calculation to destroy a 25-60 Grandmaster in less than 20 moves. As you can see, even knight c6 plus knight f5 were actually suggested as the first moves of the computer. Can you imagine that? Yes, you can. Well, I couldn't at first, you see. I just couldn't believe what was going in front of me. Even the move of rook b7, which was an extraordinary move to take out the queen in order to kill the rook, that was still on the first place of the computer analysis. And now what we see is the extraordinary thing that the Grandmaster is checkmated. This is what we see right now. Is that possible? Am I seeing wrong? No, this is. That was the game that really made me to investigate this matter myself. I could not believe how such illogical moves like knight h4 and all could have this success. Of course they're strong, but this is not a move that a player with 2200 is going to find, because that's a very deep strategy based on a pure calculation. And this is only somebody who has at least the Grandmaster level that he can understand those moves and find some of. Now some of you are going to say, okay, but Valerie, there was a draw versus Grandmaster 2500. So that wasn't a close position, so what happened? Okay, so Ivanov had the black pieces again. This was round 4, and it was a pretty interesting game. It was the Grunfeld, sort of an open system, which has one important drawback. In Grunfeld, there is a chance for an endgame. Queen's exchange. Now, I told you about the first weakness of the computers, and that's the close positions, but the second very important weakness of any computer players, in computer engines actually, or computer players maybe, is the fact that computers do not play endgames well. And it's because endgames are different than the middle game, with the fact that many endgames require a schematic thinking. Let me clarify that. Schematic thinking means that you have to really picture where you need the pieces to go, how they can plan themselves, and how to advance with your plan. Endgames are not about tactics or pure calculation. That's another problem about the engines. And that exactly saved Grandmaster Kovacevic game who managed to get a draw. The computer played a bad move of f5 that weakens the structure. Again, another, in my opinion, non-human move that simply lets white to close the bishop, and it leads to some very illogical type of places for the black pieces, which are very badly set on defense. So as you can see, a 25-60 Grandmaster in the right position can always make a draw versus a computer. An exchange happens, but of course the position is a lot simpler. So despite the fact that some of black's pieces got open, there is no tactic nor anything else that can happen. As you can see, every single move except of rook g4 really fits in with the computer analysis. Now, actually, I would like to say that the move of rook to g4 probably happened because of some consideration by black, who just decided to make this move. And yeah, of course, then there was h5, g takes 8, rook takes a6 is probably leaving to a slightly better position. I'm not sure if the last few moves were played by the computer, but in any case, the game was draw. So the only thing that saved white in that game was the end game. The simple position with no tactics and no opportunity for the computer to use its power. So was that a real computer or not? Well, let's continue our investigation. We have game round number 6. The game between Ivanov and Grandmaster, the international and very famous Grandmaster Zdenko Kozhov, that was played. As some of you probably know, it's extremely difficult to beat a Grandmaster 2600 with black. And it's even more difficult to go for a checkmate, very much like the Kurajica Grandmaster, to make a checkmate against such player in less than 40 moves. It was extraordinary. Have a look. You can still check the analysis of the computer engine, so you can actually get convinced to what happened in the game. Black played a decent opening, and the computer engine started here. d5, we have one of the first moves. Actually, the first move in computer is b6. We do have bishop b7, computer move. We do have d4, that's in the first the place of the computer, and we do have queen c7. You see, the moves change their positions from 1, 2 to 3, but as long as they stay in 1, 2, or 3, it's just a matter of time for the computer to decide to play the one move prior to the other. It's there, though. Queen c7 is one of the moves suggested by the computer. Then we have a5, first place of the computer. Castles, first place of the computer. And now, of course, white makes a very logical move, which the computer doesn't like, and he immediately takes advantage of it. Check this out. 8xb computer, knight xb, another move that follows the engine, and now the special knight d5, which was a very important move. Now, what's quite interesting is that black continues to follow the analysis of the engine. Knight c3 is the move. That pawn gets very far advanced inside the white's position, and now we follow rook a3, which is still in the top 3 of the engine, and I'm pretty sure that it will soon become number 1. So rook a3. We do have rook f8, so white slowly gets outplayed. Queen takes the c4, and then we do have queen c7. Just right now, what I'm doing is I'm actually looking at the position and I'm checking the analysis of the computer. Every single move follows perfectly with what Houdini has in mind. It's a great thing, and even now the move queen d5. It's just there was no deviation. There is nothing to sign that this is a human move. If black was playing, if I was playing, I'd probably make a move like h5 here, just to make sure that my pawns are on light squares. Now that would be a human move. You see, if black was actually following his own mind thoughts and suggestions, this would have been the move to play probably. But no, there is the initiative going. There is bishop f8, which is still suggested by the computer, and there is b5 that's suggested by the computer, and there is bishop d6 that suggests. Oh no! And now there is the final move, bishop takes g3, which was the first place of the computer, after which white's position collapses. It shows when there are queens on the board, there is no endgame. Essentially, the computer's power is showing. Why is that? It is a deep sacrifice that leads to an immediate win when black's rook captures, because the queen and the rook are playing together in a fantastic order. So black could do a move like queen f3 in this case, and there is no defense. As you can see, the computer suggests minus 2.5 for black, which means black is like 2.5 points ahead, and that's a pretty big evaluation. So you can see a Grandmaster level of 2600 being destroyed by a computer type play. Now, shortly after, we have another game that was played by Ivanov, who played with white actually against another Grandmaster, and another obvious win following more than 95% of the computer moves suggested. e4, computer move. Then we do have bishop c4. Now you got bored out of this computer move term, right? And that's true. I mean, I'm just trying to be objective. Every single move just seems to. So either the mind of White of Ivanov actually got suddenly into a computer mind, which is possible. I mean, miracles happen in this world, or there was some sort of assistant. I just can't believe that every single move, or at least the ones that are after the open, after the first 7 moves, can so much fit with what the computer says. Every single one of them. G3 is the one that follows. Knight takes f4, as you can see. Then there's bishop takes f4, and as a result of that, we do have a kill in less than 20 moves. Can you do that in the real game to a 2500 player? Believe me, you can't. You can't do that because you can't be so precise, because nobody can be. The simple thing is that most chess players who think on their own essentially use their intuition and the internal knowledge based on patterns that they've studied with the years. This kind of knowledge is good, but it has its own flaws. Sometimes we just misjudge or misevaluate positions. Sometimes they may even look very simple mistakes when they are looked from in the post-analysis, in post-mortem analysis. But essentially, these mistakes happen in the game. They happen to anyone. This player does not make those mistakes, which is a very important sign of the computer kind of play. We just see a complete destruction within at most 3 moves of some real strong Grandmaster. The other game that was played was between Ivanov and Sumets, which actually turned out accidentally to be a close position again. A 26-30 Grandmaster managed to lock up the position, and essentially Black wasn't able to take any advantage of the tactical power of an engine assistance, if eventually there was one. So you say White played a very logical setup, no flaws, no mistakes, and rather close position, which certainly didn't allow Black to use the engine power. You're probably going to say h6, was that an engine move? It wasn't out there. Believe me, it is there. See, that's a close position. Here we go. It just showed up on the computer's analysis. So each and every one of these moves in some way fits in with what the computer says. It doesn't make so much sense to play for b5 right now, considering that Black got his pieces on that area. I would rather do c4. But actually, the computer suggests rook to b8. Now, as you will see, rook b8 is one of the moves. It also recommended c4, but probably with a little bit of thinking, it suggests rook b8, and that just doesn't make sense because that every human will find out that this doesn't open a file for the rook. So why does Black play it? I have no idea. And then of course he doesn't miss the spot to play bishop g4. I'd do bishop h3 to exchange the bishop, but bishop g4 doesn't make any sense. Okay, setting it on the f3 is fine. Then we have bishop takes g2 and g5, which is a move that no player, no human opponent would choose, as it weakens a lot of the king side pressure. And of course there is c4, queen g6, and then we continue with some similar moves. So I think that White only managed to draw this game because there were no tactics. It was a reasonably close position and small chance to make a mistake. Now here's the interesting part. If you got a little bored out of what happened so far, I want to say that it was very interesting what happened. After the game against Sumets and all, there was a search. Okay. Now I'm not sure exactly which round was it, but there was a search, and I believe that Mr. Ivanov got scared. Now, anybody will get scared when there is a search. So the next game that you see against Borky Prdovic, who played with Black, is a game that has nothing. I'm saying absolutely nothing from what we've seen earlier. So Ivanov had the white pieces, and I want you to check very carefully. I'm going to start the engine so you can have a clear idea on what's happening in the game. Okay, so we start the engine. And, okay, so we do have d4, d5, c4. Now, the opening development was okay. Okay, so the opening, everybody can play the opening. But I'm saying that after knight f3, first of all, we have a move of knight f3 that even follows the computer, but there is no computer in a few moves later. The development, as I said, I can't judge any development. Rook d1 was okay. And then take a look at this. Now, after the first moves were made, after the first couple of moves were played, White starts playing, after move 15, completely logical moves. And that just shows the real strength of this player. I mean, the move of queen c4. Which sane chess master is going to set the queen on c4 so it can be attacked by the black pawn on b5 or by the knight? I mean, a master level player would never do this move, yet white does it. Obviously doesn't fit with computer's analysis. This shows the moment where I believe Ivanov stopped using an engine for his game. So we do have b5, then we do have queen b6, and then we have g4, which in my opinion didn't make sense as the bishop didn't do anything there. It's okay though. And then we have bishop f4, which again just shows now it's a purely human moves. Moves that don't make so much sense, especially the move of a3, which is extremely bad. I think that white should have just played knight h4 to try and get rid of this bishop. You see, knight h4 would make sense, as this would have held black to take. And okay, maybe you will say that would trap the queen down. Yes, but then white can take 3 pieces. If that was a computer here, it would have seen that move. Yet white played a3, and then the queen went backward, and of course it was forced to move away. It was e3, b4, exchange, takes. Black made a little inaccuracy, and then a terrible move from white's side, which is knight e5. It was an attack in a position where all white had to do is to stabilize, or probably play for knight e1 to get his knight into the position. It was an attacking move, which simply shows something very important to me. As I'm a chess coach and I work with any kind of players from any level, I know something that in chess we call understanding. See, the understanding is based on all the knowledge and principles that you've gotten through the years, so you can really feel the game better. No strong player who's able to beat 100 players who ever do knight e5, because that violates one of the most important principles of strategy. And it says, do not attack if you are having a weak piece preparation and development. Knight e5 doesn't attack anything after all, except of knight c6, and it violates this principle. As a result, his position gets very weak after knight d7, and black wins another 2 tempi to bring his knight on c4. And now we see the knight coming out there, c takes to the d, knight takes b2, queen takes c3, and white was just hammered here. It's just the same way on how 26 beat 2200 player. A very truthful game, I have to say. Now, can you recognize anything in this game, anything that has to do with the previous games, the win against Kurajica or Korzul? Do you see anything here? No, I don't. If I play that game as black, even I would win him in 20 moves, you see? This is just the way how it was supposed to be. And so, doesn't it strike you as an amazing coincidence that this happened right after the search? I mean, I believe that it happened after the search, or right when the games were stopped to transmit online. Doesn't that strike you as an extraordinary coincidence, or is it just me? Well, let's have a look at the next. We do have one more game, and that's the final game. Now, one of the things is that when they searched him, they said that they didn't find anything in him. Now, I'm going to talk about that a little later. But the most common misconception is that people believe that he cheated by having something in his ear, like a mini microphone, which is really deep and it cannot be seen or removed by anyone, by a doctor. And yet I think it is not true. You see, the easiest way to set something with which you can cheat is to get 2 things. A special glass in your eye that can actually provide an image to someone who is having connection with it. It could be I believe that there are special glasses that can transmit connection even to up to 2 kilometers or something. And that mini microphone, which I believe cannot be removed as well. So we have 2 very simple things. No connection is needed for that. Just a simple special glass, which is on the one eye, and essentially it transmits the image. So what you see is transmitted to someone who has access to that camera. So that is the operator who plays the move on the computer, okay? And he says what the computer's response is onto the mini microphone, so that transmits the signal, and the player who has this special glass can also hear the response that he should do against this move. It's much simpler. No connection required. Okay, just some partner who can do this. This is what I believe happened. It's very obvious in that last game, which was simply a destruction. Let me start the engine again so you can see for yourself. Out of the previous horrible game that Ivanov had, here he destroys a 2600 Grandmaster again with black in an amazing style. We have Sicilian, a nightmare to play against computers, because basically computers are pretty good in tactical positions. Sicilian is all about tactical strategy. So essentially white started off pretty good. There was knight d e5, queen f2, castles, knight b3. And now we have the opening theory finishing in... Okay, well, we've already finished the opening theory according to Fritz, and now the computer sets in motion. Queen c8, knight d7, and we have queen c7. Look at the computer's first move. Every single move is what the computer suggests. We have b4, again, one of the options of the computer. We do have knight a5 that was actually out there, suggested by the computer in the first place again. And we have a sacrifice of an exchange. Who would do that? Well, let's go on. Knight takes b3, knight takes a8, bishop takes a8, and the pawn takes to b3. So black is an exchange down. Now, if I ask any grandmaster, he's probably going to say, okay, maybe black has a little bit of a compensation, but it's not enough. I'd be scared to do that against 2600, and yet black did it. And look at the attack he got out of this. He played a5, which is one of the moves again by the computer. Then we have the exchange going on. And then we have queen b6 that happens, so that the queen is moving. Is that the move still in the computer? Yes, it is. One of the first three moves. You see, it's just a matter of time for the computer to change it on the first place. Here we go. Queen b7 got for 1 second on the first place. If the computer engine is set on a tournament mode, it will have the time to think, but before he plays his own move, and that's what happens. So white made an inaccuracy. You can clearly see good play by white and human move like queen g2, normal move to neutralize the queen. If it was a computer by white, it would play bf5, but he wasn't. He was just a strong grandmaster. He played queen g2, and we can continue how black exploited that mistake with the precise queen a6, a4 on the side, a takes b that opens a line, and the rook that comes out a8. There was no move that didn't fit with the first three suggestions offered by Houdini. Going on later, we do have d5 as well, which sets a powerful outpost of the knight, and of course is recommended as one of the top moves by Houdini. And of course there is a check. Then there is knight b6. The bishop is sacrificed. That was an extraordinary bishop sacrifice, which is followed by queen f1, a precise move that sets the queen in a trap. It's called a mating web, and as a result, white loses in a devastating way. His king gets constantly checked. There is another check, and his queen gets lost. And I mean, 3 of the games against the 3 strongest players, grandmasters, black managed to go for a checkmating attack. Doesn't that again strike as an extraordinary coincidence? This is not something you do to grandmasters on a repetitive basis. This is something a computer can do to grandmasters, but not a man. You see, and that is what I have actually concluded out of these all games. What I have concluded is that more than 95 to 97% of these moves are all suggested by the strongest engine. Now, if I was going to cheat, I would never do that. But if I was going to do that, I would have never done it in such a stupid way. I would have taken an engine, for example, some old engine who can win games. Let's say, even if you take a 27600 engine, now Houdini is 3100, but even if you take a 2700 engine, it would still beat some of these grandmasters because it's good at tactics and it's enough. So it's going to be harder to catch. Yet this guy is taking a Houdini engine, the strongest chess engine in the world, which is easier to track down. So it's easier to track down that these are all computer moves. I just don't see the sense of it. You see, basically, he wasn't even so experienced as a player to know what he should do to cover his tracks. That's at least my opinion. Nevertheless, what I decided to do was to look into the FIDE website a little later and actually check a little more about this guy's rating. And let me show you what I was able to find. Now let's go with the individual calculations for ratings. So we're not going to take a look at the ratings so much. We're going to see something else that's interesting. The results of this player, especially from 2011 and 2012, are pretty bad. I mean, you can see here, he's beating 2000, but always losing to 2200. 2200 is beating him. 2200 is beating him, 1800 is beating him. So basically, he wasn't having anything special. What's interesting is that in 2011, in December last year, he played again in that Zadar Open tournament that was actually the big group. And you can see a real poor performance. 6 out of 9 playing with only players up to 2100. Okay, there is a one player of 2200 who he lost against, and you can see he has a draw against 2000, loss versus 2200, loss versus 2000, draw versus 2000. Is it possible in 1 year So to get from losing to 2100 and beating 2600 players? Well, we have to make a little more investigation. Let's check the tournaments that were in the September rank list here. We have the 27 International Open in Tetem. And you see, this is a tournament that I deeply respect because it's a very good tournament. I played there in 2008. I've had some great results. I got 7 out of 9. The players are not too strong, but it's a very good tournament. And this is a tournament where I believe no cheating was used. You can see he managed to win some 1900 and 2000 players, but in reality, he lost versus 2400, and you can see that the last 3 games, he repetitively lost versus 2017, 2100, 2013. And then we certainly have a big international tournament, the Balkan Amateur Chess Festival, Belogradchik 2012. That was a pretty big festival as far as I remember. See, I'm a Bulgarian, so I know most of the tournaments that are going here. So he loses against a 1900 player, and then we have 7 out of 7. Now this is the moment where I believe that since of the tournament in Tatavan, which finished in the August 5th, he had about 15 days to organize his equipment and get ready for that tournament. Now, why did he lose against the 1900 player then? He lost because 1900 player, he thought that he could easily beat. Obviously, that was a mistake on his side, which he very easily fixed by setting the engine on and destroying anybody out there. But, okay, that's just hypothetically. Then what about the other tournaments? I mean, did it happen all the same after that one? Yes. This was the tournament, Balkan Amateur Chess Festival, which had very good prizes, a strong international tournament where that thing started. Overall, we have another game that he played, one game in a memorial that he lost, but this was just one game. I'm not sure what this was about. He just lost against the Grandmaster. That we don't need to look at that. And then we go up to December, National Students Championship. 2 games were played in a very real way versus Martin Medvedev and Sekova that finished in draws. And then we have some devastating games versus 4 higher rated players and very powerful results, 4 out of 4. Then of course we have the Zadar tournament and beating 2600. Now fortunately I had the chance to get the games from the National Students Chess Championship, where I believe there was also a cheating suspicion, and let me show you what I found. The first game was against an unrated player. We don't have to look at it, everybody can win an unrated player, but take a look at the next games. This is the first one versus Tsekova. Now, we have an 1875 rated player who is actually making a draw, and it's not just a simple draw. Check this out. I mean, what happens here is that White played a very bad opening, which shows that his opening knowledge is not up to par as well. And as a result, he left himself with a weak pawn on the d3, which later on, of course, got transformed with a move like d4, but White lost any sort of an opening advantage. And we see some terrible moves, like bishop e3, retreating the bishop instead of supporting it, as any master level player would do. We do have some moves like h3, which were okay, I suppose, g4, and then that was a draw. You see, there was no creativity. There was nothing. You know, it was just a draw against an 1800 player. And what is even making more impression is the next game, which was actually a draw against a 2000 player that was played in an extremely poor way by Ivanov. Have a look at that. He was playing with black's pieces, and it started with d5, e6, knight f6, knight d7. We do have some moves like b6, bishop b7. We do have rook c8 as well. And then we do have some terrible moves like knight e4 and knight takes d2. How could a master player do this? Make 3 moves with the knight to exchange White's knight on d2 that has made just 1 and help his queen to develop. Is that a move that is okay? And you're going to say, but the computer suggests it. Maybe. But, you know, that was here it was a sort of a coincidence because Black didn't even exchange on e5. He played a horrible d takes to c4, which opens up the c6 pawn as a weakness directly to the White bishop. And shortly afterwards, what we see is that Black didn't even make... I mean, White played terribly. He didn't even take that pawn or whatever. He could have just played knight takes to c4, but I guess he got scared because of knight takes c5 and the pin. So he played queen e2, and then we see that Black didn't even take a moment to exchange on e5 and then capture b3. Now this really looks weird. Later on, we have a queen c7 move, which simply gives away the pawn on c6, which white was able to take on and destroy the position. Now this is a funny game. Everything that black does in this game just makes no sense whatsoever. Even the exchange that was always there, he didn't do it, and so it was very weird. And later on, black gets a position with a pawn up. This is a 2200 player playing versus 2000 with a pawn up, and he doesn't know how to win. See, when I was 2200. I could win a position with even one square to control against 2000. I was beating any 2000 players who get in a worse position than me. And black didn't do it. Was that luck? Well, have a look yourself. After b5, okay, white played some weird moves. Obviously, he wasn't playing anything anyhow stronger. So black did go in a sort of a natural way. And then suddenly, we see that after a while, there's queen h5 check. Black's position and the advantage actually grows. While he's collecting pawns, he's making a terrible idea to open up the white bishop. Now, I would never open that diagonal because it's just bad. The king is there, and that's the only chance for a counterattack by white. But even later, going up a little later, we see something different. We see black is just continuing to pressure, which wasn't that bad. Okay, an exchange of queens. As you can see, most of the moves here don't fit in with what the computer is suggesting. There are mainly human moves. Some moves fit with the computer, and now we have the typical human mistake. It was a very big mistake, offering the queen's exchange, and then of course after that leaving that pawn to fall and some other things to happen. That was just bad. I would have done queen d5 and then black wins. Queen d2 just shows why humans make mistakes. This is what was supposed to be versus any of these grandmasters, but it didn't happen. Now after the check, black actually has to move the bishop back, because after king to g7 there is a checkmate. And that's a pretty basic tactical mistake, you see. It's a pretty basic one. We also realize that after bishop to f8, a white can just exchange a queen and take on c5, which a 2000 player can very easily notice. And then we see that the bishop there falls, there is bishop b4, and white's playing a bishop ahead. And with these two games, we realize that this player is not supposed to be 2200. You know, if you look at the charts of FIDE, you would find out that he has not beaten a 2200 player prior to these tournaments. You see, he did not beat anyone at that level. In my opinion, after looking at all these games, I would assess that the strength of this player is nothing more than 2050 to 2100 at most. See, that's what I find. And later on, when these draws happen, I just want you to see the games versus the 2400 international masters of the same tournament. And I mean, imagine this guy who's blundering pieces makes two masterpieces shortly on the same tournament. We have a game where he's playing black versus an international master, and okay, he's playing the King's Indian. Now again, I'm going to come back to my actual suggestion that you look at the computer engine, starting from this move. Knight e4 is the computer suggestion, knight takes g5 is the computer suggestion, e6 is the computer suggestion, and the take is it. Okay, we do have queen d6 as a computer suggestion. He doesn't even make an attempt to make an own move so he can follow it up with the computer and make it less suspicious. You see, it's really bugging anybody who's watching this right now, I suppose. It's every move. Even a5 is now suggested on the first move of the computer. It's kind of funny to see those games. It's like Houdini playing an international master. How does that sound? It sounds terrible. So there is c5, again the first move by the computer. Obviously black's playing better. It's now normal 2300 to lose versus a 3300 engine player. And then of course we notice a few things like the strong c5 that's made next, the perfect coordination, queen b6 that follows again the computer mind suggestions, simply logical sacrifice of a queen versus two rooks, which is backed up by a very strong tactical motive. And of course we see that black has the idea to take on e3 right now and destroy with these two bishops. So white was just gradually outplayed, and there was no battle. See, the problem in his won games is that there is no fighting. You see, if the position is close to endgame, which are the two typical weaknesses of the computer, maybe some top GM is going to get a draw. But if the position gets tactical, his opponents definitely lose. Even here, the game against Ivanov, a good friend of mine, as a matter of fact, who played with black here, is a very typical example of using assistance during the game. We have a simple opening system. And then we do start with the games of the computer. Knight e5, one of the top moves of the engine. Bishop f3, rook e1, that is actually offered by the computer. Then we have knight a3, which is once again one of the first moves. Knight takes to c4, bishop takes d5, queen f3. The knight's coming back. You see, you got bored probably by hearing me how I suggest that every single move is the computer. And then we see rook ec1. That move, when I saw it, I was like, this is not human playing. How could anybody put his rook on from e to c1 and leave that rook on a1? Would you do that? I don't care what your rating is. Everybody would do rook ac1 right now. You know what I think? I think that either white misheard the suggestion, or probably the computer simply recommended it, because the computer suggests that rook ac1 is the first and then rook ec1 is the second. So either white heard rook c1 and he didn't know which rook to put, or probably the computer for whatever crazy reason decided to lock up the rook on a1. And that's just not a move that any human being with a sane mind and a master level could ever do in an actual game like that. Then we follow a totally terrible idea to exchange pieces when there is an isolated pawn. One of the principles is don't exchange pieces when you have pawn weakness. So White's doing it because he's backing that up to a tactic. Knight c6. And then we have b4, which is the first on the computer. Bishop goes to e5. b5 follows the first move of the computer again. Rook c2. Is the computer going to give it? Yes, there it is. I always know that the move is coming on the top of the computer suggestions. Then we have bishop takes g7, queen e4. Were these moves out there? Yep. Well, bishop takes g7 wasn't, but it's just for now. I'm pretty sure that in a minute or so, the computer is going to recommend that, as it looks very logical. Take out the bishop, and yeah, well, okay. I believe that the computer had a little more time to think during those games. Yet the assistance was used. And then we have a logical human move, a6, which just offers to open up the rook. A small mistake, pretty much enough for any engine to take advantage. If the rook takes, there is the smart knight b8, after which white is winning. Is that a blunder? Yes, maybe. But in the previous games between the Grandmasters, there was no blunder. The precision of white is making this too perfect, you know. It's just a little too perfect. Rook c to c1 is the computer move again. Knight takes to the d, queen takes to the d. We realize that with every single one of these moves, white just sets up the first move of the computer program. Now that is not something we can tolerate, right? This is just not right. And this is from someone who actually gave away a pawn and gave away a bishop in the first two games. Can you believe that? I can't. You know, I have seen fast improvement in chess, alright? I have seen people improve in 2 months with 200 points. Of course, we're not talking about a level of 2000. I'm talking about some 1500 players. I've never seen a player to reach that perfection in 1 or 2 days. I mean, that game was played on the 11th of November 2012, and the terrible games versus Tsekova and Medvedev were played actually subsequently on the 8th of November and the 9th of November. In 2 days to start playing like a computer, that sounds like a plan. So, I actually have to say that despite all these, I mean, anybody will say, but you don't have a proof. Now, again, I don't really need a proof. You see, everybody can decide for himself. You see, then you see some perfect results, some really tremendous results here. Okay, we have a tournament, obviously, the Gran Torneo tournament from España, where we notice that there were some wins versus 2200 and there were some losses. I believe, I don't have the games from that tournament, but I believe that the losses were purposeful. Now, what we call a purposeful loss is the possibility for you to win some games, and just to make the suspicion a little less, you lose one. You see, so people say, okay, this guy loses a game, so that's fine. That's the way how you get a rating higher. So he won most of his games and he lost some, just so that it's not too obvious. And so everybody can judge for himself. I don't have a proof. I'm just going to tell you how this can work. You see, I love my country a lot, and I think that we have a lot of great tournaments and everything, but there is a very bad practice in the universities. We have some cheating technology, which is pretty easy though, and some students in the universities use that technology to get very easy A grades and B grades. What they do is that they set up a mini microphone that is deep in their ear, and it cannot be removed or found by anyone but a doctor, a medical person. And we do have these special kind of glasses, which are someone said in the article that I've read that this equipment is really expensive. That could be in the other countries, but in our country, This is really something you can get for no less than 50 euro. That's right, 25 euro and 25 euro for the other. Two tools for 20. Do you want me to show you? I'm going to do that now. Now we do have some really cool stuff. So if you come in our country, you can find some very cheap. We see a hidden camera in a weatherproof wedge for 100 leva, which is about 70 euro or something. So we do have a hidden camera and everything. Even there is a you can hide it in a chewing gum, or basically you can put it anywhere. There is also a chance. I mean, I know about 3 different type of cameras that have been used in universities. We have a remote camera, which means that you could set the camera somewhere on a chair or whatever, so it can just translate an image, which actually that when that image is transmitted, the operator can see it and see what's played on the board. So it's very easy to set a hidden camera. The strip search doesn't work because I believe that this is not the way how one should act. First of all, the camera may not be with him. He may put it somewhere. It's a mini camera, so he can even put it in a chair. He can put it on the table. He can move it around the table. Or, there are a lot of ways on how he can basically move it in such a place so that they don't find it with him. It's pretty simple to do. Also, we have laws. Okay, in most of the European countries, search is difficult to make before a certain warrant. And so, considering the minimal size of these tools, it's very easy to hide these things before a search actually takes place. So there are a lot of ways to avoid such a situation, especially if he has thought this through. That's what I'm trying to say, basically. Okay, what about this? So this is going to transmit an image. So what is the way how he's going to receive moves? Okay, well, as you can see, this is not pretty expensive. So we do have an earphone, mini earphone. You can see it, 90 level, about 40 euro. So there's earphone which you can really put so deep in your ear, so it can be only pulled out of medic. You see, about the cameras, I forgot to mention the special glass thing that we also have. So it's like you can just put it there. It sounds like an advertisement, right? No, I'm just saying what could have happened and why a strip search or supposedly good moves that follow 95% of the computer moves just is not normal. So we do have tools. Everybody, I mean, in other countries, such tools may be a little more expensive, I agree. But there are some tools that can actually provide a possibility for cheating in such a way. And there are a lot of different sorts of cheating tools that can happen. I believe that some of these two, special camera, mini camera, and mini earphone, was put in this player. He found out the way to do it so that they don't catch him, and that's where the perfect games came from. That's where grandmasters were probably prepared for with many months before that tournament. 26 grandmasters who are working every day for 8 hours per day to get there and get a good prize as a reward for their exhaustive work to prepare for the tournament, are being beaten by a beginner player, a 2000 player. Well, I don't want to say that this is a beginner player, but for them, for a grandmaster, it's a beginner player who actually comes there and he uses a top engine to destroy them out of the start and make checkmates or win queens. It just doesn't sound right, don't you think? Now, what is the way to deal with that? Now, I've searched about that and I found out something very special. There is a jammer. See, if every organizer of a big tournament can spend a couple of $1,000 for a jammer that can basically neutralize the signal of any electronic device that can be used in the tournament hall. I mean, already there is a rule that forbids using electronic devices in the tournament hall, so that nobody's going to complain about that. So if there is a jammer, it wouldn't be possible for any player to receive a signal to his earphone or whatever, except of just walking out of his chair. Now this is easy to detect because, okay, first of all, the computer should consistently show the right moves in order for you to win a strong player. And when he steps out of the chair for 5 times, I'm going to tell the arbiter that this guy is just playing quite good and he's stepping out for many times, so he can make him go back and sit on his table until the game is over. So jammers must be used, and in order to prevent such kind of cheating, and as this is very obvious cheating, it's impossible play, impossible level, an impossible short time to improve that much. And obviously, there was a simple system for such cheating: a hidden camera and a mini earphone in the air, so that basically you can the camera can transmit the signal. Whoever is the operator with the computer, with the engine, can see the board and what move was played on the computer. The computer responds, and he's telling on this receiver and on this mini microphone, earphone, what the move should be. So that player who doesn't even have the chance to stand 2600 players for around 20 to 30 moves can actually play in the strongest possible way and create some brilliant games that only a computer can make. So again, that was probably my longest broadcast on any block I've made so far. And I want to say that because you will find it strange, as I'm a Bulgarian, I'm actually talking against a Bulgarian player who has been doing this. And you see, I just want to mention my own observations, and I wanted to provide a little deeper analysis to each of the games, and my understanding as a chess FIDE Master 2400 rated player who's used to playing strong players, how that kind of play and that kind of results is just not possible. And I wanted also to provide an idea on what he's been doing and essentially why he wasn't caught, because he's planned for such a search that to happen, obviously. And you could hide the camera anywhere. It doesn't need to be with him. You could hide it in a bottle. You could hide it in the table during the game, and you can throw it off afterwards. It doesn't need to be that one. And it's very difficult to get caught, except if jammers don't get to be used. So for all the organizers or tournaments and other players who want to play good chess, I mean, when there are such strong tournaments with 2600 grandmasters and very experienced players playing, there must be jammers to simply neutralize signal that anybody could be receiving in a cell phone and a receiver or whatever. That will prevent any cheating suspicion thing. And these jammers are not that expensive too. Well, probably a couple $1,000, but definitely, if some organizer is going to spend about 50,000 euro, for example, to organize a big tournament, now a couple thousand to prevent cheating are definitely worth spending for. So that's my own investigation on that matter. I hope that you found my suggestions interesting, and for any of you who are listening to this, and for any organizers who are listening, I hope my suggestions make sense so that you can make your tournaments safer and definitely more quality ones. Thank you again.